After the armistice in November 1918, Britain remembered its 750,000 war dead in more than 37,000 memorials. Almost every town and village has one, a poignant reminder of a lost generation, a permanent monument to their bravery and sacrifice. But in Tavistock Square in central London, there's a very unusual and far more contentious memorial. Very few people know about this memorial. Most simply walk past, and those that do notice it may not be entirely comfortable with its sentiment, because this memorial commemorates the lives of those determined not to fight, the conscientious objectors, or conchies, as they were popularly but not affectionately known. In this film, I'm going to investigate the lives of some of these men. And ask, 90 years on, were they cowards and shirkers? Or were they, in their own way, courageous for refusing to join the fight? When the British government began its recruitment drive in 1914, it was overwhelmed by the patriotic response. At the start of the war, there was no question of conscription, of forcing men to sign up. The French may have done it, and the Germans certainly had no qualms. But the British Army felt it just wasn't British. One War Office minister said conscription was foreign to the British nation, to the British character, and to the genius of our people. 2 years of slaughter on the Western Front destroyed such romantic notions. Such were the casualties, the government had to take extreme measures. In 1916, Parliament approved the Military Service Act, a radical piece of legislation, forcibly enlisting all unmarried men aged 18 to 41. The original act is kept at the Parliamentary Archives. It was pretty all-encompassing, though there were some exemptions. A, on the grounds that your job was in the national interest. B, on the grounds that if you were called up, your dependents would be destitute. C, on the grounds of your ill health or infirmity. And D, here it is, the unexpected one, on the ground of a conscientious objection to the undertaking of combatant service. The conscientious objector, as we know it, was born. 16,000 conscientious objectors applied for exemption. They fell into two categories. Those who refused to do anything to help the war effort, men known as absolutists, and those prepared to do non-combat work, alternativists. It's not widely remembered, but several thousand conscientious objectors served in non-combat roles at the front. As stretcher bearers on the battlefield, as labourers in a specially formed non-combatant corps, and as medics and orderlies. 18-year-old Cedric Vipont Brown was a Quaker, a member of the Society of Friends. He was morally opposed to war on religious grounds. In 1914, Cedric joined the Friends Ambulance Unit. It provided alternative service for those not prepared to fight. I'm meeting Cedric's daughter, Susan Hartshorn.
I have a picture here of the Friends Ambulance Unit at the training camp in Buckinghamshire in 1914, and there's my father in the middle of the front row. Yeah.
They do look like any other group of young men who've joined up.
Well, I don't think they were very much different from any other group of young men.
Over 1,000 men joined the ranks of the FAU. They may have worn uniforms, but the volunteers were very much civilians. They worked at the front, unarmed and unpaid. It was a dangerous task. Cedric himself was wounded and gassed while recovering casualties.
He'd never seen such carnage, and in fact, in his diary, he says so. The sight of some 15 badly wounded persons lying in a row in what used to be a stable is a sight I will never forget. It is war stripped of all glory, leaving its cruel, bloody and repulsive self.
It sounds as though the job required quite a lot of courage, which isn't necessarily what people would say, oh, conscientious objectors, they were trying to avoid it. That's not true.
I don't think that's true. I think he was a brave man, but then I wouldn't I?
Cedric served with the FAU for 4 years. But when he encouraged his younger brother Ralph, a medical student, to join up, he refused. Ralph felt the Friends Ambulance Unit was too militaristic. He didn't believe that conscientious objectors should be patching up the wounded just to return them to the war. So instead, Ralph joined the Friends War Relief Service, another Quaker-run outfit which dealt only with civilian victims of the war. Ralph wanted to do his bit to help, but he didn't want to help the army. In 1916, Ralph began work at a Quaker-run maternity hospital at Chalon-sur-Marne in northern France. It seems remarkable that anything approaching normal life could go on so close to the front. But despite the danger of shelling and air raids, almost 1,000 babies were born at Chalon during the war. While there, Ralph kept a diary in which he condemned what he called the unspeakable slaughter. "When shall we come to our senses?" he wrote. "The self-willed suicide of the human race continues, each nation blaming the other like children. When will men realize how disastrously they have misled themselves?" This is Les Baraques military cemetery in Calais. It contains over 1,500 graves. This is a typical row of graves that you might find in any Commonwealth military cemetery. There are men from the Gordon Highlanders, the Australian Infantry, the Royal Engineers. But this one seems a little out of place. It's Ralph Vipont Brown. The inscription begins, "Peace, peace." With some irony, the man who didn't want to work with soldiers is buried forever alongside them. In March 1919, Ralph contracted the Spanish flu on duty in France. He died within days, a victim of an epidemic that took 20 million lives. Ralph's sacrifice has been honoured today, even though he was a conscientious objector. But where should we draw the line? Should we also remember the men who stubbornly refused to help the war effort in any capacity? The absolutists. Is it right to commemorate them too?